All right, what's up, everybody? Live on YouTube. I got a few friends that stayed up late, even though they have been up since very early, and I'm very excited to be with y'all. I promise you, I won't keep you very long tonight. This is just a celebration of not only what I've been able to accomplish, but even more so what um, each of you have enabled me to accomplish. And so I hope tonight that is you celebrate kind of your own contribution to this as much as I celebrate it myself. And so I just want to give you a quick rundown of how tonight's going to go. We probably won't even be 30 minutes long at the most. I do have a couple of guests I'm going to introduce here in just a little bit. Got a bug on my Braves hat. They're not doing too good. Yeah, so we'll kind of do a little intro here in the beginning. I'm gonna talk about some giveaways and some features that of the night. You'll see the little ticker down here at the bottom. You can read that whenever you're zoned out of whatever I'm saying. So I'll give some details here in just a second, and then I'm gonna read a page from the book, which I'll put up on the screen while I do that, just kind of an excerpt. And then if there's any questions that have come in on the chat, by that point, I will definitely answer those. Then we're going to get to our guests, and then I'm going to do some giveaways to wrap up the evening. So, with that said, let me just go ahead and give a few shout outs to those that are already showing the love in the comments. We had my buddy Blake Rackley from college. He's in the book. Mitch Benedict shouted out Mida Dutton. That's Mida Mitch. If you served uh, in the Maryland area with me, you would know what Mida Mitch is. TJ Garman also coming live from Maryland tonight. So glad that he's here. Mark Goodman with 70 times 7 .org, an incredible person, author himself, and working on a feature film. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that or not, but I just did. So he can tell me if I'm not supposed to say it, but it's going to be very, very exciting. Who else we got? My brother, Conrad Morgan. Sparky's in the house. Got Darren Cooper, Caleb Campbell, my mother-in-law, Tracy, which I assume that means Billy's watching as well. Love y'all. Blake Bear's in the house. Chris Reynolds, Jesse Campbell, and Mark Goodman says, I'm all good to share the news. So I won't go any further on it. I don't want to spoil his news, but he's got some very exciting things coming. And you should definitely check out his ministry, 70 times 7.org. All right, let me run through the kind of the order of some things here just for a second. So we are going to do some giveaways tonight. If you haven't already read the ticker at the bottom, if you ask a question in the comments tonight, then I'm going to email you tonight before I go to bed. I'm going to email you. Oh, Johnny and Lindsay Taylor's in the house, and Troy. Sorry, I'll try not to get distracted by the comments, but it's a lot of people that I love all at one time, and it's making me very happy. Anyway, if you drop a question in the chat tonight, for me or for the guests that I'm going to have on, and we take your question, then I'm going to email you the digital download for the audiobook, so that if you're like me, a lot of times you don't have time to sit and read the physical book, you can listen to the book, which I narrate as well. So that's what's happening there. Live chat, comment, ask questions. Y'all are already doing so great at that. I'm super pumped that everybody's in the house. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about book reviews here in just a second, but last thing too is, if any of you do the social media thing, I know lots of people do it, lots of people don't do it. If you do it, I would love for you to just kind of share anything about the book. Positive would be great. And use hashtag growing upward launch. Okay, hashtag growing upward launch. All right, I want to read a portion of the book, but before I do that, I do want to give a big update. I'm sure those of you that have been following this journey for a while have probably been like, where are the actual physical books? Like, this is a physical book, not just an ebook or anything like that. Well, we have with Hurricane Helene. Am I saying that right? Is it Helene? Hurricane Helene hitting kind of a little bit of our area, but mostly northern area, where my books are being printed and shipped from. They did not arrive in time for today, which I'm super bummed about. But seeing all you here tonight in the comments has really filled my heart. The good news is they are sitting in Atlanta right now, and they are slated to be here tomorrow afternoon. So I'll post some stuff and probably go live on Instagram when they come in, and you can see the physical book. I really wanted to have physical copies of the book tonight to show you. As you can see, I have a stack of envelopes behind me sitting in that gray chair. That's all of you that pre-ordered the book. So they are addressed and ready to go. As soon as the book comes in, the books come in tomorrow, I'm going to stuff those. I'm going to run to the post office, and I'm going to get you your books that you pre-ordered. So that's what's happening on the shipping. I wanted to try to have them to you either shipped out today or shipped to you by like have it arrive to you by today. But that's just not what God had in mind, and that's okay. We're here for it. So I'm gonna give just a prequel to this page that I'm gonna read, and then I want to share this page with you just to give you a taste of kind of what you can expect in the book. And then when I'm done with that, I've got two very special guests I'm going to bring on to talk about their role in making this book come to life. So, as many as you know, that this is a bit of a short memoir. It's only 120 something pages, maybe right at 120, and which I'm super proud of it. I don't like books that just kind of go on and on. Um, and I kind of get to the end of the book or the end of the chapter, and I'm just like, that chapter could have been like half as long. So I tried to be quick and to the point, and hopefully left you wanting more. I'd rather you leave a book that I write going, man, I wish he had wrote more, than read a book that I write and be like, man, I wish he would shut up. There's just too much going on here. So that's why it's short, but I'm really proud of it. Last year, right around this time, I had put together 3 book proposals, just for myself. I wasn't trying to pitch them to publishers or anything because I'm not really in that world yet, to make a name for myself yet. And I threw these proposals out to many of you that are watching, and I said, "Hey, if I was going to write a book, which I plan to, and I plan to write all 3 of these books, which one would you want to read first? Which one would you feel like this is your first book?" And honestly, I didn't want to write this one. I wanted to write the other ones first because this one dealt with a lot of heartache and a lot of tragedy and um, just some really difficult things that I knew I needed to write, but it wasn't the one that was going to be the easiest. In fact, I knew it was going to be the hardest one to write. And so this book is a little bit about me growing up. So that's hence the title, Growing Upward. But it's also about my journey through mental health, which I think is something that we all journey through. It's just a matter of if we acknowledge that we're in that journey or not and what we do with it. And so this is just my contribution to the conversation. I feel like especially men don't talk about it enough. And so I wanted to share that to the world. But to be extremely frank, which I've shared on my podcast a little bit already, if you follow there at all, but I mostly wrote this book. You'll see on the dedication page that I mostly wrote this book for my kids because I want them to have something like this if I'm no longer here. We all have a timeline on our lives, and we're all going to come to a date where we're no longer here, and hopefully our kids are still left behind us. And so I mostly just wanted them to have it because I really wish I had something like this from my parents who are no longer here. Now, what I do have is super cool. I shared it on Instagram story earlier today. I have tons and tons, boxes and boxes of old photos. In fact, Sarah and I were just looking at a few of the old photos before we went live tonight. And that's super special. But I also wish I had some kind of written documentation of their life, their lives, and their story, like told from their perspective. And so that's a really elongated way of saying that's why I wrote this book. Um, and so what I want to share with you tonight is from chapter 6. There's 9 chapters in the book, plus a forward intro and some acknowledgments at the end. Chapter 6 is called Overwhelmed. And by this point in the story, Sarah and I have, been married for a few years, both Ethan and Aubrey. have been born, and we're living in Indiana. And I just got to the point where I'm seeing my a counselor for the first time. His name is Brad Dobson. He still practices in the Indianapolis area. And so I just kind of wanted to bring you up to speed before I read this clip. So, or before I read this page. So let me pull up the page here and I'll read it to you. All right. So for the first few sessions, I unloaded on him my life story, pretty much everything you've read up to this point. I expected Brad's response to be one of shock and utter distaste, but he sat quietly listening, only injecting with a few questions of clarity and, of course, the cliche, how did that make you feel? He also would often interject, beginning to reroute my thought patterns, always with a sarcastic grin that playfully irked my nerves because I knew he was right. Eventually, after a few sessions of hearing my story and giving me enough hope to calm down and see this process through, we got into the beginning stages of what is known as CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. You see, what I had practiced and become a master at over the short couple of decades of my life at that point was to have negative thoughts constantly, letting those thoughts fester and spiral into unfiltered words or behavior that wasn't who I really was deep down. This is why I've always been quick to apologize. Even those that I've hurt the most in my life will tell you to this day how quick I am to apologize for my words or behavior. I learned early on through those sessions that it seemed out of my control and I didn't really want to behave that way. This caused me to get sent to the principal's offices, suspended from school, asked not to return to teams or clubs, and eventually would lead to a few job changes. I didn't want it to be that way. I hated myself for it, which just fed even more into the negative thought spirals and thus more poor choices of words and actions. Now, I know you might listen to that and go, well, that's dark. But I hope you understand what I'm trying to do here in this book is to be extremely raw and vulnerable with you and give you exactly what my thought process was through each of these areas of my life. And that's not the end of the story. That's only chapter 6. There's going to be some resolve in there. There's going to be some conclusion, I promise. And I'm not going to leave you on a cliffhanger. There's not a part 2 coming that I know of. And so yeah, that's just an excerpt from the book. That's kind of the vibe. That's, if you're like, wonder what the vibe is, I wonder what I can expect. Again, it's a short book. If you're not like, hey, I'm a big reader, it won't take you very long to read this. Even if you are a super slow reader, it's very, very unintimidating, I guess is the right word there. But yeah, would love for you to obviously pick it up and read it. So let me just catch up on the comments here just for a quick second. My buddy Ben Thompson here in Villa Rica is in the house. So glad that you're tuned in, buddy. Love you. Ty Gallenback. Ty actually was really vital in helping me write this book. Ty would text me early on in the process to make sure that I was writing, and we were accountability partners when it came to writing. And so I owe Ty quite a bit. See, Nick and Lou are watching. I love you guys to death. Let's see. Mitch asked a couple questions. I'll get to that one here in a second. Natalie, love you guys. Lindsay Stoner gave me a woo. I love it. All right, let's see here. Mitch asks, what was the most reward part about writing this book? I'm going to guess he meant rewarding. I will say probably the most rewarding part of writing this book was that it's done. I think a lot of times in life, we have great ambitions and we don't really fulfill them. I have a lot of people that have told me throughout this process, they're like, I can't believe you're actually doing it. And that's actually kind of one of the things that spurred me on. And you'll see a short mention of this in the acknowledgments of the book. You'll also, if you follow me on social media on Instagram, you see that I've already posted this. But there's a friend of mine locally who's an author as well. He's a professional creative. He's actually a film director. Lives here locally in Atlanta. I was at a men's retreat with him a year or so ago up in Virginia, and a bunch of other people were there, and he was writing his first book. And I was just remember looking at him going like, man, you're doing it. You're out there doing it. And so that's kind of the doing it, the fact that it's done is easily probably the most rewarding part for me. So thanks for asking, Mitch. I'll make sure you get your audiobook if you haven't already. My buddy Blake says 120 pages still a lot for a young writer. Man, thank you for calling me young. That made my night. Great job completing that. I know it's hard. Yeah, Blake's a writer himself and an incredible writer. And anything he puts out is genius. Let's see what we got. Blake coming in with the hard hits. Thanks, Blake. What part did you least want to write? I mean, all of it, but specifically chapter 8 talks about the anyone who's close to me, which I think I know everybody on here. There's no strangers on here. So everybody knows between middle of 2020 to the middle of 2021, I lost my mom, lost my dad, and lost my sister. All just under 12 months, all three of them. And writing the retelling of that was extremely difficult, and I was not looking forward to it in any way. It started out, the first couple chapters started out very therapeutic, which I talked to other authors as well. And they said the same thing. They're like, hey, you kind of start to get in the zone and you lose your place, lose your kind of sense of awareness of where you're at in that moment. And that definitely happened to me. So yeah, I didn't want to write I didn't want to write any of it, but chapter 8 was the most difficult part to write, and it's still the most difficult part to read. When I recorded the audiobook a couple of weeks ago, it was still tough. Let me just say too, before, I think I got one more question here. Yeah, Mitch, words are hard. I get it. One more question here before I wrap up. But before I get to that, I just want to say, audiobook wise, I will say this. I learned a ton. If you have never written a book before, I would love to sit down and have coffee with you or eat a meal or whatever and tell you all the things I learned of what not to do when writing a book. I learned a ton of what not to do. And specifically, I learned not to uh, trust others on the timeline of when I should be submitting my files to certain things. Because when I started submitting audiobook files and the actual book files themselves, I realized that, yeah, I mean, processing time is pretty quick, but then from there, it takes even longer to get onto things. So, for example, the audiobook is what I'm talking about here. Audiobook's been done for a week or two at least, and got uploaded fairly quickly through the distributor. But immediately they're like, hey, thanks. This is awesome. It's going to be great. We're going to get through all the quality checks and we're going to get it right on out there. Once it got through all the quality checks and it passed everything, they were like, yeah. In the next 4 to 6 weeks, you should see it, kind of start to trickle out a little bit. And I was just like, oh, so not soon. That's cool. So it's still trickling out. That's why if you pre-ordered the book and I promised you audiobook, or if I took one of your questions tonight and I owe you an audiobook, I'm going to send you a Dropbox folder with the the audio files in order so that you can listen to it just like I listened to it after it was done. So I love it. Let's see. Last question that I have here before, and then I'll get to my guests. My buddy Conrad, through all of the doing, were there any aspects that you found more difficult than others? Yeah. I think probably the biggest piece of advice that I got from a lot of people who had already written before, they all said, hey, sitting down to do the writing is going to be the hardest part. And that was definitely the most physically difficult part, was sitting down and actually starting to do the writing. I felt like I had a good rhythm early on. Some of you, even Conrad, were kind of with me on that journey of like, hey, how many pages you got? How many chapters are you in? First 2 to 4 chapters went pretty quickly. Then I kind of got stuck at chapter 5. Some things happened in life and I kind of lost my pattern of writing. And so I think if I had to do it all over again, I would do little bits of daily writing instead of big chunks of weekly writing. So that was definitely just trying to find my rhythm of the right rhythm of writing was probably the most difficult aspect for me. So yeah. All right. Let me bring on my first guest who is here, quote unquote, in studio with me. It's my wife, Sarah. You can come on over here. Sarah, if you don't know, is an amazing designer, and she designed, see if you can scoot up a little bit. She designed not only the cover and back cover and flap and all that stuff. Let me see if I can get to it so I can show you all again. She designed all of this. Like, this is an actual photo of me and my dad. I've had people ask, like, which one is you on the cover? And I go, that's funny. The big one's my dad. The little guy is me. This is us sitting outside the racetrack in Richmond, Virginia, where we used to go to NASCAR races together twice a year. Anyway, I told Sarah, I said, I want this photo to be dominant on the cover. And she went from there and ran with it and created some amazing things out of it. So I wanted to bring her on here to talk about her process of it, because she not only designed the cover. I don't have an image prepared to show you the back cover and the inside flaps and all that. I'll show you all that tomorrow on Instagram when the books actually show up. But she not only designed all that cover stuff, apparently there's also like a design process to the actual inside of the book. I don't even have like an inside of a book here. Let me just like, so like when you get a book and you're just like, I mean, this just looks like a computer laid it out. Like, no, like a real person had to design all of the things that you see. And Sarah was that real person for me. So I wanted to have her come on here. I know I'm already almost at 30 minutes. I've got one more special guest and then I'll wrap it after her. But I just briefly wanted her to share what designing this book was like.
Yeah. Well, it was a dream to be able to design a book, because when I was in art school, all I wanted to do was layout design, which is the nerdy term for what I was doing. But it basically allowed me to create a brand within the book. So I got to decide fonts and spacing on fonts and how are we going to all the nerdy stuff. How are we going to style quotes and call outs, and what are we going to say about this person when they give their endorsement, and what's breaking the rules? Who are we supposed to cite? There were many questions that we had to ask the editor. Are we allowed to do this? Because we don't want to cease and desist on this book. So there was just, it was fun. It was an adventure. It was crazy to like see it on the computer, and my studio is right over here. So I would literally call him in and be like, look, it's on the screen. Like, this is happening. You have an ISBN number with a code and all the kinds of things. So
yeah, the moment she called me in to show me the ISBN number was a real thing. Yeah. I think she was more excited than I was. I was like, yeah, it's part of the book. She's like, but it's real. You have like an actual barcode. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
It's the little things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And his editor even shared how unique it was that we were actually working together on the layout, because commonly a writer, an author, sends their book to a publication house, and that publication house then farms it out to a designer, and rarely do those two parties talk. So there was a lot of integration in what it looked like. So, yeah.
Awesome. Before I get to my next guest, you can just hang out with him the rest of the time if you want.
Okay.
Chris, or sorry, I wasn't supposed to say his name. Had another he's laughing now. I had another guest that's going to join me here in a second, but he reminded me that old Sparky had a question for me, and I wanted to answer that first before we got into it. Sparky asked, do you remember the moment that you realized you had to write this, and what was it? Well, had to write this? Yeah, the moment I realized I had to write it is when I started sending out those 3 book proposals to some of my closest friends, and I asked them to tell me which one I should write first or which one they would want to read first. And I think all but one person picked this one as the first one that they wanted to read first, and the one that I should write first. So that was the moment that I realized I had to write it, and I wasn't too thrilled with it. So that's a great question. Thanks, dude. All right, let me get ready for Chris. Let me see. Oh, Caleb. Lovey-dovey eyes when Sarah started talking was the best. Oh,
jeez.
Like, I got my old college buddies up in here talking. I got Aaron Beaver talking with Blake Rackley. I miss you guys. All right, let me get my not so secret second guest on here real quick. Let's bring the Chris Comstock.
Very official branding. It's very important.
If you don't know already, which I don't know how you would know unless you're close to us and we told you already. Chris, I asked Chris early on in this process if he would write the foreword. And having not even read a single sentence of the book, he's like, yeah, man, of course, no brainer. Just tell me what you need. And it was awesome. Getting the foreword from him when he got done writing it was an emotional thing. Yeah, I just want to ask him about just a generic question.
What are we doing here, man?
We're not doing this. I tell you that much. First of all, let's just give some love to Chris. TJ says the Chris Comstock. Mitch, long live the Three Amigos, and Johnny Taylor knows you.
Just saw that.
He knows you.
And
good work. Chris Reynolds said he's skipping the foreword.
I would too.
I wouldn't expect. I would expect nothing less.
We just say first and foremost, Chris Reynolds, you nailed the spelling of forward.
You did. That was one thing we learned.
There was an E in the word forward for a book. So learn that.
Yeah. So we learned that when we sent it off. I told Chris I had to send off his portion to the editor as well, and he's like, "What for?" It's pretty good to go. I don't.
Grammarly took care of it.
Like, I like no notes. We're good.
Yeah, we're good.
And I was like, yeah. But I gotta send it to as part of the process. I gotta send it to them. And they came back and they're like, well, first of all, you spelled forward wrong. I was like, oh,
that's the landing.
That's something. That's something. But yeah, that's how you spell forward. FOREWORD. I think you had the ARD.
I was so wrong. I did all of it wrong. Yeah.
You had I think you had the E in there. You just had ARD, WARD.
Let me tell you, I have the OG right here. I did. It was ARD. Yeah.
ARD. Yeah. He told me, he's like, man, I can't wait I'm going to print out whatever your editor comes back with, and I'm going to lay it side by side with what I did originally.
And they were right. Yeah.
And we're going to see who's right.
They were right.
Classic Enneagram 3. All right. Tell us about writing the foreword, Chris.
Yeah. Man, it was an honor to do it. Super proud of you finishing this book and putting together what I think the way that I framed it up is probably the best just read from the foreword, which I think it evokes both profound empathy when you're reading through this book. And I read the whole book before I wrote the foreword because I didn't want to write just because I know you wanted to write based on the emotion out of the book on the other side of it. Yeah. Just profound empathy. And then the other piece is just this incredible sense of hope on the other side of it. Because he's right. Like the arc of the storyline, like, you hurt, but I think you do. It was so easy to write because I felt like I sat at your table for the whole book. I felt like I was sitting with your family, experiencing the things you experienced, hurting the way you hurt. And on the other side of it, man, like it was, I think it's something everybody needs to read just because you get to watch somebody process through honestly, we lived together for a lot of years now, but those 2 years for the both of us were some of the worst losses of our lives. And so to see it in real life and then on paper, it never translates as well, but I think I wrote the foreword in probably less than 30 minutes once I finished the book. I've read the book and then I just wrote. And then I just sent it off because I didn't want to overthink it and be like, no, maybe I should sound smarter. It needed to be raw because that's what your book is. Your book is just a raw take on life. And I just wanted to be authentic in that as an Enneagram 4 would appreciate and just allow it to be, hopefully bring just a little bit of a glimmer of the beauty of this book. It really is great. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. Sometimes you see, book forwards, and this is going to sound like a knock, but it's 100% not. But sometimes you see book forwards and they go, what's the biggest name I can get to write a forward in this book?
Well,
and I'm
nailed it on this one.
That's exactly what I did. I said, what's the biggest name I can get? And it's the Chris Comstock.
If they search for the wrong Chris Comstock, they're going to think some
real marshmallow. Is who I went after. That's another story.
It's a great story for another day. In my memoir, we'll talk about Instagram handles, but I think it's great. I really tried to honor Dustin. At the end of the day, I just tried to honor the book as a whole. and the heart that you had exposed through it. And so it was genuinely just a great joy to just sit and tell a little bit of just the appreciation I have for the efforts you put in. Man, it's great. It's great. Y'all should all read it. Obviously. Not
Awesome.
the forward. I don't care if you read the forward or not.
Yeah, that's
Start skipping
what we're talking about.
Reynolds.
It's actually a launch party just for the forward. I haven't even written the book yet.
Yeah.
It's just a
forward's gonna change your life, man. Yeah.
These 4 words. Yeah, you're trending in the comments with the
Thank
forward
you.
comment.
Yeah,
I got
right,
TJ with his version of how to spell
Yeah.
forward. I got Johnny Taylor claiming that he wrote the forward. So yeah, it's a real
ironically it was 554 words is what the forward was. So there you go.
Ooh, I love it.
You're
I love
welcome.
it. Well, thanks so much, man, for doing that.
course.
Obviously, it means the world to me. What I was getting at with the authors picking the people to do it is I think that they typically try to go after, a big name rather than someone who kind of walked the journey with them. And as you read that hard chapter 8, you're going to hear what we walked through with Chris and his lovely wife, Renee, as well, who all of us experienced very, very close, sudden loss, and what that was like. And I honestly think that that's something that people don't spend time enough kind of digesting, of how that grief hits, and the proper way to grieve, and how to talk about grieving, and all of those things. And so having Chris and Renee in our corner, and how God had us down here. I mean, Chris Reynolds played a huge part in that, how God had us down here for that season to be down here when those things happened, is not lost on me at all. It's just the way that God works. So thanks for doing it, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's enough sappy sap stuff. Tomorrow, I promise I will post pictures and videos and all that stuff when the books actually finally arrive. Yeah, it's been a real incredible journey. I think I've got 4 or 5 different people on here that I'm going to be sending audiobooks to tonight. I'll go back over the comments, and if you asked a question, I'll make sure you have one before I go to bed tonight. But yeah, I'm just super thankful for everybody being on here, all the comments, all the likes, all the encouragement. The text started pre 6:30 this morning with Johnny B. I don't know why he was up that early. Must have been some cartoons on. I don't know. He texted me before 6:30 this morning. And not just today, like all leading up to today. It's been incredible. An incredible journey, and one that I'll never forget. Yeah, so thankful for everybody on here. Thank you guys for your support. Locally here, Underground Books put in an order today, so they're going to carry it. If you're watching in the Indiana area, Wild Geese bookstore in Franklin, Indiana, will be carrying it as well. So stop by, see Tiffany, tell her thank you for carrying my book, and you can pick it up there until it will slowly start trickling out to the Walmart.com and Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all these places through the distributor. But that's just taking a little bit longer than I realized, but it's okay. It's out now, and we can get it for you. So holler at me and let me know if you need a copy of it, or if you want to get a copy of it. I'd be happy to help you out there. It'll be on audiobook platforms. I'll be sharing that stuff with you as well. So yeah, I think that's everything. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I've already kept you about 10 minutes longer than I wanted to. So y'all have an amazing night, and I'm going to try to go sleep my best before Christmas hits tomorrow. Love you guys. Talk to you soon.